The notification sound on my phone cut through the morning silence like a blade. I was making breakfast for Emma and Jake, my 8- and 6-year-old children, when I saw my brother Marcus's name on the screen. The message that followed stopped my heart cold. Stay away from the family reunion this weekend, Willie. Nobody wants you or your poor children there. You're an embarrassment to our family name. My hands trembled as I read those words again. 2 years since Sarah died in that horrible car accident. 2 years of struggling to keep our heads above water while working double shifts at the warehouse. 2 years of watching my kids ask why Uncle Marcus never visits anymore. But instead of breaking down, something unexpected happened. I smiled. I pulled out Detective Rodriguez's business card and dialed his number. "It's time," I said simply. Within minutes, Marcus was calling me frantically. "Willie, what's happening? What did you just do?" I sent him a text back that made my pulse quicken. "Just the beginning, brother." The rift between Marcus and me didn't start with Sarah's death, though that's when it became irreparable. It began 3 years ago when our father passed away from a massive heart attack at 68. Dad had built Patterson Construction from nothing, turning it into one of the most respected building companies in our county. Everyone expected Marcus, being 4 years older, to inherit everything. Instead, Dad left the business to both of us equally, though he made Marcus the primary operator since he'd been working there since college. I received our childhood home on Maple Street, a beautiful 3-story Victorian that needed extensive repairs. Marcus got the liquid assets and company control, but the will stated that major business decisions required both our signatures. Marcus never forgave Dad for that stipulation. He'd spent his whole life trying to prove he was the favorite son, the responsible one, the heir apparent. When Dad's will was read, Marcus's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "This is ridiculous," Marcus had hissed at me outside the lawyer's office. "You've never shown any interest in the business. You were always Dad's little pet, getting away with everything." His words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. Dad and I had shared a love of baseball and classic rock music that Marcus never appreciated. We'd spend Saturday mornings working on old cars in the garage while Marcus studied business journals and talked about profit margins. After Sarah's diagnosis with stage 4 ovarian cancer came 6 months later, my world shifted completely. The medical bills started piling up immediately. Insurance covered some treatments, but the experimental therapies that might save her life weren't included. I mortgaged the house Dad left me, then took out a second mortgage. When that wasn't enough, I approached Marcus about borrowing against my share of the business. "Absolutely not," he'd said, sitting behind Dad's old oak desk like he owned the world. "The business needs to maintain liquidity for growth opportunities. I can't risk our financial stability for your wife's medical expenses." The coldness in his voice shattered something inside me. This wasn't just business talk. This was my brother telling me my wife's life wasn't worth the risk. Sarah fought for 18 months before the cancer won. During her final weeks, Marcus visited, once staying for exactly 15 minutes and spending most of that time checking his phone. At her funeral, he made a brief appearance, shook some hands, and left before the burial. I was so consumed with grief and arranging care for Emma and Jake that I didn't fully process his absence until later. The house had to be sold to pay the remaining medical debt and funeral costs. Emma and Jake lost the only home they'd ever known, the place where their mother had read them bedtime stories and helped them with homework. We moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a complex where the elevator rarely worked and the neighbors played music too loud. The children's bedroom had water stains on the ceiling and windows that wouldn't open properly. Marcus began his campaign against me immediately after the funeral. He told our Aunt Dorothy that I was financially irresponsible and had squandered Dad's inheritance. He convinced Uncle Frank that I was unstable from grief and might make poor decisions regarding the business. Slowly, systematically, he poisoned the well with every family member who would listen. The truth was, I'd briefly worked for Patterson Construction after Sarah's death, trying to learn the business and earn enough to support my family. Marcus assigned me to menial tasks, claiming I needed to start from the bottom, despite being a 50% owner. During those 3 months, I noticed discrepancies in the books. Invoices for materials that seemed inflated. Bills for work that appeared questionable. When I asked Marcus about them, he became defensive and accusatory. "You don't understand the construction business," he'd snapped. "These are standard practices. Maybe you should focus on learning your job instead of playing detective." But something in his reaction told me I'd struck a nerve. The way his jaw tightened, how he avoided eye contact, the speed with which he dismissed my concerns all felt wrong. That's when I made the phone call that started everything. Detective Rodriguez had been recommended by my lawyer as someone who specialized in financial investigations. The retainer fee took most of my savings money I desperately needed for rent and groceries, but I had to know if my suspicions were justified. "Your brother's been very busy," Rodriguez had told me after our first meeting 6 months ago. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many family betrayals. "What I've found so far suggests this goes much deeper than simple book cooking. Are you prepared for what we might uncover?" I thought about Emma asking why we couldn't afford her art classes anymore, about Jake wearing shoes with holes because new ones weren't in the budget. I thought about Marcus living in his 5,000-square-foot house while my children slept on a mattress on the floor. "Find everything," I'd told Rodriguez, "no matter how bad it gets." 6 months earlier, when I first walked into Detective Rodriguez's small office above the hardware store on Main Street, I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole would go. Rodriguez was a former police detective turned private investigator, a stocky man in his 50s with graying temples and tired eyes that had seen too much human greed. His office walls were covered with certificates and commendations, but what struck me most was a framed photo of 2 young children on his desk. "My grandkids," he'd explained, noticing my gaze. "Their parents went through a nasty divorce involving hidden assets. That's what got me into financial investigation work. Nobody should have to watch their children suffer because adults can't be honest about money." His words resonated with me as I explained my suspicions about Marcus and Patterson Construction. The first breakthrough came within 2 weeks. Rodriguez discovered that Marcus had been billing clients for premium-grade materials while purchasing cheaper alternatives, pocketing the difference. The scheme was sophisticated, involving fake invoices from shell companies and kickbacks to suppliers who looked the other way. Conservative estimates suggested he'd stolen over $300,000 in the past 2 years alone. But that was just the beginning. Rodriguez uncovered a pattern of fraudulent tax deductions claimed on behalf of the business. Marcus had been writing off personal expenses as company costs, including his luxury car payments, country club memberships, and family vacations to Europe. The IRS paperwork showed charitable donations that never actually occurred, employee benefits that were claimed but never paid out, and business equipment purchases that existed only on paper. The most devastating discovery came when Rodriguez traced money flowing into offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Marcus had been systematically moving profits out of the country, claiming reduced business income to avoid paying proper taxes and employee bonuses. The workers at Patterson Construction believed the company was struggling financially because Marcus showed them doctored books while hiding the real profits overseas. During this investigation period, my life became a grinding cycle of work and worry. I was pulling 3 jobs to make ends meet: my main position at the warehouse loading dock from 6 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, stocking shelves at a grocery store from 4 to 8 in the evening, and delivering newspapers starting at 4:30 in the morning. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, surviving on coffee and determination. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, became my lifeline during those months. This sweet 72-year-old widow had lived next to our apartment complex for decades and took pity on Emma and Jake. She'd watch them before school started and help with homework when I was working late. Her kindness was the only thing preventing my children from becoming latchkey kids at ages 8 and 6. "You're working yourself to death, Willie," Mrs. Patterson would tell me when I'd stumble home exhausted. Those babies need their father healthy. But what choice did I have? Every dollar Rodriguez charged for his investigation was money I didn't have for groceries or clothing. Emma's shoes had worn through the soles, and Jake needed a winter coat that I couldn't afford. The weight of providing for them while paying for the investigation felt crushing. The breakthrough that changed everything came on a rainy Thursday evening in March. Rodriguez called me as I was finishing my shift at the grocery store, his voice tight with excitement and anger. "Willie, we need to meet immediately. What I found today changes the entire scope of this case." He wouldn't tell me over the phone, insisting we meet at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. Rodriguez arrived carrying a thick manila folder and a laptop computer. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled fury. "Your brother isn't just stealing from the business," he began without preamble. "He's been embezzling from the employee pension fund. Over 40 families are going to lose their retirement savings because of what he's done." The evidence was, overwhelming. Marcus had gained access to the pension fund by forging my signature on authorization documents, claiming I'd approved the transfers as co-owner. He'd been moving money from the retirement accounts into his personal investments, gambling on high-risk stocks and cryptocurrency. When those investments failed, instead of replacing the money, he doubled down with more pension funds. "How much?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Nearly $2 million, Rodriguez replied. "Gone. Some of these people have been with your father's company for 20 years thinking they had secure retirements waiting for them. Instead, they're going to discover their accounts are empty." The magnitude of Marcus's betrayal hit me like a physical blow. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real families, hard-working people who trusted their futures to a company my father had built on integrity and honesty. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. He opened his laptop and showed me bank records that made my stomach turn. Marcus had taken out massive loans using the business as collateral money that he'd used to fund an apparently serious gambling addiction. Online poker sports, betting trips to Atlantic City casinos, all funded by money stolen from employee pensions and company profits. "The pattern suggests he's been doing this for at least 3 years, Rodriguez explained. "It probably started small, maybe borrowing from the pension fund with intentions of paying it back. But addiction has a way of escalating, and now he's in so deep that replacing the money is impossible." The timeline meant Marcus's theft had begun before our father's death, while Dad was still alive and trusting his oldest son to help run the family business. The final piece of Rodriguez's investigation revealed the most chilling truth of all. Marcus had been in contact with a commercial real estate development company about selling Patterson Construction's property and assets. The preliminary agreement Rodriguez uncovered showed Marcus planning to liquidate everything, claiming financial distress required emergency action to save what remained of the business. According to this paperwork, Rodriguez said, pointing to documents he'd obtained through contacts in the real estate industry, "Your brother is planning to sell the entire company during the family reunion weekend. He's told the buyers that you've agreed to the sale due to mounting debts and legal troubles. Your signature is supposedly on preliminary agreements, though obviously those signatures are forged." The reunion was Marcus's endgame. He'd manipulated the entire family into believing I was the problem, the unstable brother who couldn't be trusted with important decisions. Then, surrounded by family members who supported him, he planned to complete the sale using fraudulent documents and disappear with millions of dollars while leaving destroyed lives in his wake. "What do we do?" I asked Rodriguez, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of Marcus's crimes. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since I'd known him. "We give him exactly what he wants. We let him think he's won right up until the moment we destroy him completely." The plan Rodriguez outlined was both elegant and terrifying in its complexity. We would allow Marcus to proceed with his family reunion manipulation, but this time I'd be prepared with evidence and backup. The FBI had been interested in Rodriguez's findings, particularly the pension fund embezzlement, which constituted federal crimes under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. Special Agent Catherine Mills agreed to coordinate with local authorities to build an airtight case. Meanwhile, Marcus had been busy orchestrating what he believed would be his final performance. The family reunion scheduled for the weekend at our father's old lake house in the mountains would host nearly 30 relatives. Marcus had been calling everyone personally, painting me as an increasingly unstable influence on family decisions. His manipulation was masterful, playing on genuine concerns about grief and financial stress while hiding his own criminal behavior. I learned about his campaign through my cousin Jessica, who called me 3 weeks before the reunion with barely concealed worry in her voice. "Willie, I'm concerned about you." She began her tone, carrying the careful distance of someone who'd been coached on what to say. "Marcus mentioned you've been making some questionable financial decisions lately. He thinks maybe the stress of raising Emma and Jake alone has become overwhelming." The conversation revealed the depth of Marcus's deception. He'd told Jessica that I was obsessed with conspiracy theories about the business and had been acting paranoid and aggressive during family phone calls. He claimed I'd threatened him during our last conversation, suggesting I might be having some kind of mental health crisis related to Sarah's death and my financial struggles. "He's worried about your children," Jessica continued. "He thinks maybe they'd be better off with more stable family members until you can get the help you need." The implication was clear. Marcus wasn't just planning to steal money and disappear. He was positioning himself to claim guardianship of Emma and Jake, probably to access any insurance money or benefits they might be entitled to. Uncle Frank had received a similar treatment, with Marcus painting me as financially reckless and potentially dangerous. "He's been asking strange questions about the business," Marcus had apparently told Frank, "getting angry when I try to protect company assets from his poor judgment. I think the grief has affected his mental state more than any of us realized." Frank, who'd never been particularly close to me, accepted Marcus's version of events without question. Aunt Dorothy's conversation with Marcus had been particularly painful to learn about. She'd always been fond of me, remembering me as the nephew who helped her move furniture and fix her computer when it broke down. But Marcus had approached her concerns about my children with calculated precision. "Willie's struggling more than he's willing to admit," Marcus had told her. "The kids are suffering because he's too proud to accept help. Emma's grades are dropping and Jake's been having behavioral problems at school. Social services might get involved if things don't improve." None of this was true. Emma was maintaining honor roll status despite our financial struggles, and Jake's only behavioral issue was asking too many questions about why Uncle Marcus never visited anymore. The most crushing revelation came when I learned Marcus had been spreading lies about Sarah's death. He'd suggested to several family members that I'd been neglectful during her illness, implying that better medical decisions might have saved her life. He claimed I'd refused certain treatments due to cost prioritizing money over my wife's survival. This lie cut deeper than any theft or financial crime. Sarah's battle with cancer had been the most agonizing period of my life, watching the woman I loved fade away, despite everything doctors could do. I'd mortgaged our home, emptied our savings, and borrowed against my future to pay for experimental treatments that ultimately proved futile. The suggestion that I'd chosen money over Sarah's life was so far from reality, it left me speechless with rage. Rodriguez helped me understand that Marcus's character assassination served multiple purposes. By establishing me as mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and potentially neglectful of my children, he created justification for excluding me from business decisions. Family members would support his control of Patterson Construction if they believed I couldn't be trusted with important responsibilities. Classic narcissistic manipulation, Rodriguez explained during one of our planning sessions. He's not just stealing money. He's stealing your identity, your reputation, your relationships with people you love. When the reunion happens, everyone will see you as the problem that needs to be managed, not the victim of his crimes. But Rodriguez had also uncovered Marcus's most pressing motivation for accelerating his timeline. The gambling debts weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represented money owed to extremely dangerous people who were growing impatient with Marcus's promises of repayment. Phone records Rodriguez obtained showed increasing desperation in Marcus's conversations with loan sharks and illegal bookmakers. Your brother owes approximately $2.3 million to people who don't accept payment plans, Rodriguez informed me grimly. Based on the conversations I've heard, he has maybe 2 weeks before they start taking physical action to collect what he owes them. This explained the sudden urgency around the family reunion and business sale. Marcus wasn't just greedy, he was terrified. The lake house where the reunion would take place held special significance for our family. Dad had purchased it 25 years ago as a weekend retreat, spending countless hours teaching Marcus and me to fish from the old wooden dock. The house itself was a modest 3-bedroom cabin that could comfortably sleep 8 people. Though reunion weekends typically involved camping and air mattresses to accommodate everyone, Marcus had been planning the weekend with military precision. He'd arranged for catered meals, rented additional furniture, and organized activities designed to keep everyone relaxed and receptive to his influence. The business sale documents would be presented as a formality, a necessary step to protect the family legacy from my supposed instability and poor judgment. Rodriguez's counterplan was equally detailed. I would attend the reunion with Emma and Jake despite Marcus's text message telling me to stay away. Hidden recording devices would capture Marcus's admissions and manipulations. FBI agents would be positioned nearby, ready to move in once we had sufficient evidence on tape. Most importantly, the real estate buyers would be contacted and informed that one of the property owners was disputing the sale, effectively killing Marcus's escape plan. Remember, Rodriguez coached me during our final preparation session. Your brother thinks he's smarter than everyone else. That arrogance will be his downfall. Let him talk. Let him brag. Give him enough rope to hang himself with his own words. The night before the reunion, I sat in our tiny apartment watching Emma and Jake sleep peacefully, unaware that their uncle had been systematically destroying their future security. They'd been through so much already, losing their mother and adjusting to a completely different lifestyle. Now they were about to discover that the family member who should have protected them had instead been plotting against them. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Seriously, Willie, don't come tomorrow. This is for your own good. The family has made their position clear about you and your situation. I smiled as I typed my response. See you tomorrow, brother. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The morning of the reunion dawned crisp and clear, with autumn leaves painting the mountain landscape in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. As I loaded Emma and Jake into our 10-year-old Honda Civic, my hands weren't quite steady. Rodriguez had coached me extensively on what to say and how to act, but the weight of what we were attempting felt enormous. One wrong move could derail months of investigation and let Marcus escape with millions of stolen dollars. Emma, dressed in her best outfit that we'd found at the thrift store, was excited about seeing her cousins for the first time in over a year. Daddy, will Uncle Marcus be nice to us today? She asked as I buckled her seatbelt. Her question broke my heart because it revealed how aware she was of his rejection. 8-year-old children shouldn't have to wonder if family members will treat them kindly. Jake, bouncing in his booster seat, was more focused on the prospect of fishing and s'mores around the campfire. Can we catch the big bass that Grandpa always talked about? He wanted to know. At 6 years old, he still remembered the stories our father used to tell about the legendary fish that supposedly lived in the deepest part of the lake. The drive to the lake house normally took 90 minutes, but I deliberately left early to give Rodriguez time for final preparations. He'd arrived at the property before dawn, positioning surveillance equipment and coordinating with FBI agents who would remain hidden in the surrounding woods. Special Agent Mills had assured me that federal backup would be immediately available if the situation escalated beyond normal family drama. My phone rang as we wound through the mountain curves, Rodriguez's voice coming through the Bluetooth speaker. Everything's in position, Willie. Remember, the recording device in your jacket will capture audio clearly, but you need to stay within 30 feet of Marcus for optimal quality. Don't force conversations, just let him naturally reveal his plans. What if he realizes something's wrong? I asked, keeping my voice low so the children wouldn't overhear our discussion. Trust me, his arrogance won't let him consider that possibility. He thinks he's orchestrated the perfect crime and manipulation. That confidence will make him careless with his words. Rodriguez's experience with financial criminals had taught him that the most successful con artists often destroyed themselves by bragging about their cleverness. We arrived at the lake house to find the parking area already crowded with familiar vehicles. Aunt Dorothy's silver minivan sat next to Uncle Frank's pickup truck, while Cousin Timothy's sports car gleamed in the morning sunlight. Marcus's black luxury sedan, purchased with stolen money, though nobody else knew that yet, dominated the center of the space like a monument to his false success. Emma and Jake ran ahead toward the cabin, their excitement temporarily overriding any nervousness about family dynamics. I could hear voices and laughter from the back deck where everyone was gathering for the traditional reunion breakfast. Taking a deep breath, I activated the recording device hidden in my jacket pocket and followed my children toward what I hoped would be Marcus's downfall. Marcus spotted me immediately as we rounded the corner of the cabin, his face shifting from surprise to anger to forced congeniality in the space of seconds. "Willie," he called out with fake enthusiasm. "I didn't expect to see you here after our conversation yesterday." His tone carried just enough confusion to make other family members wonder what conversation he was referring to. "Wouldn't miss the family reunion for anything," I replied evenly, accepting awkward hugs from relatives who seemed unsure how to greet me. Aunt Dorothy's embrace felt stiff and brief, while Uncle Frank offered only a handshake and a neutral nod. Cousin Jessica avoided eye contact, entirely busying herself with arranging food on the picnic table. Marcus quickly moved to control the narrative, addressing the assembled family with practiced authority. "Well, now that we're all here, we can discuss some important family business that affects everyone." His voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to being taken seriously, though I now knew his authority was built on lies and manipulation. "Actually," I interjected before he could continue, "I think the kids would love to see the lake first. Emma and Jake have been looking forward to this all week." My interruption clearly frustrated Marcus, but he couldn't object without appearing unreasonable in front of the family. The next few hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Marcus attempted to separate me from other family members whenever possible, clearly wanting private conversations where he could present his version of events without contradiction. Meanwhile, I stayed close to Emma and Jake, using their presence as a natural reason to avoid being cornered too early in the day. During lunch preparation, I overheard Marcus speaking quietly with Timothy and Jessica near the cabin's kitchen window. "Willie's been under tremendous stress since Sarah died," he was saying, his voice carrying manufactured concern. "The financial pressure raising 2 kids alone, it's been overwhelming for him. I'm worried he might make some poor decisions regarding family assets." Jessica nodded sympathetically, completely unaware that Marcus was manipulating her protective instincts. "Is there anything we can do to help?" she asked. "Maybe someone else could handle business decisions until he's in a better place emotionally." "That's exactly what I've been thinking," Marcus replied, his satisfaction barely concealed. "It might be best if I took full operational control of Dad's company for a while, just temporarily until Willie gets back on his feet." The casual way he suggested stealing my inheritance while pretending concern for my well-being was breathtaking in its cynicism. As afternoon approached, Marcus began setting the stage for his main performance. He'd brought a briefcase full of legal documents supposedly requiring my signature to formalize various business arrangements. The papers looked official and complex, designed to confuse anyone who didn't read them carefully. Hidden among routine operational agreements were documents transferring my ownership rights to Marcus permanently. "Willie, we need to talk privately," Marcus announced as family members relaxed around the cabin after lunch. "There are some urgent business matters that can't wait any longer." His tone suggested this was a reasonable request, though I could see calculation in his eyes. "Of course." I agreed readily, following him toward the lake dock where we'd have privacy from other family members. This was the moment Rodriguez and I had planned for the opportunity to get Marcus talking freely about his real intentions. The recording device in my jacket would capture everything, building the evidence needed for his eventual prosecution. As we walked down the wooden path toward the water, Marcus's demeanor shifted subtly. The false concern and family man act began falling away, replaced by the cold businessman I'd come to recognize over the past few years. "I want you to sign these documents today," he said without preamble, opening his briefcase as we reached the end of the dock. "What exactly am I signing?" I asked, though Rodriguez had already explained the likely contents of Marcus's fraudulent paperwork. Marcus's smile was sharp and predatory. "Papers that will finally put Dad's business in competent hands. You've proven you can't handle financial responsibility, Willie. It's time to let someone qualified make the important decisions." His words dripped with condescension, revealing the contempt he'd apparently felt for years, but had never expressed so openly. The conversation that followed would provide everything Rodriguez and the FBI needed to destroy Marcus completely. But as I listened to my brother outline his plans for stealing my inheritance and painting me as mentally unstable, I realized we were dealing with someone far more dangerous than a simple embezzler. Marcus wasn't just stealing money. He was systematically destroying my life with calculated precision, and he was enjoying every minute of it. What I didn't know was that Marcus's gambling creditors were already at the lake house watching from the tree line and waiting for their money. The reunion was about to become something none of us had anticipated, and the trap Rodriguez and I had set was about to spring in ways we'd never imagined. The wooden dock creaked under our feet as Marcus spread legal documents across his briefcase, using it as an improvised desk. The afternoon sun reflected off the lake's surface, creating dancing patterns of light that seemed almost peaceful despite the tension crackling between us. In the distance, I could hear Emma and Jake laughing with their cousins, completely unaware that their future was being decided in this conversation. Marcus's transformation from concerned brother to cold businessman was complete now that we were alone. "These documents will transfer your ownership stake in Patterson Construction to me," he explained matter-of-factly, pointing to signature lines highlighted in yellow. "Given your obvious financial instability and questionable judgment, it's the only responsible course of action." Questionable judgment. I repeated, keeping my voice calm while the recording device captured every word. "Can you be more specific about what you mean by that?" Marcus's eyes gleamed with satisfaction at the question, apparently eager to justify his actions. "Where should I start, Willie, mortgaging Dad's house for your wife's medical bills instead of accepting reality? Refusing practical advice about end-of-life care because you couldn't let go? Then selling the house for a fraction of its value instead of waiting for market conditions to improve?" His casual dismissal of Sarah's battle with cancer hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain focused on gathering evidence. "You think I should have let Sarah die to protect property values? I think you should have made rational decisions instead of emotional ones," Marcus replied coldly. "A good businessman knows when to cut his losses and move forward. You've never understood that principle, which is why you're living in a 2-bedroom apartment while I've successfully grown Dad's company into a multi-million-dollar enterprise." The irony of his words was staggering, considering Rodriguez's evidence showed Marcus had been systematically looting the company for years. But I needed him to reveal specific details about his crimes, so I played into his arrogance. "You're right. The business has been incredibly successful under your management. How exactly have you achieved such impressive growth?" Marcus preened at what he interpreted as acknowledgement of his business acumen. "Strategic cost management, Willie. Negotiating better deals with suppliers, optimizing material purchases, expanding our client base through competitive pricing. It's called running a business efficiently instead of letting emotions cloud your judgment. Those supplier negotiations must have been particularly profitable." I prompted, hoping he'd elaborate on the fraudulent invoicing Rodriguez had uncovered. Extremely profitable, Marcus confirmed with obvious pride. I've managed to reduce material costs by over 40% while maintaining quality standards. Our profit margins are the highest they've ever been. He was essentially confessing to the billing fraud, though he clearly didn't realize the implications of his words. As Marcus continued explaining his supposed business genius, other family members began drifting toward the dock area. Aunt Dorothy appeared, first followed by Uncle Frank and the cousins. Marcus noticed the approaching audience and smoothly transitioned into his concerned brother performance. "Willie, I know this is difficult," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "but these legal arrangements are necessary to protect the family business. Your emotional state since Sarah's death has made it impossible for you to participate in important decisions rationally." Aunt Dorothy stepped onto the dock with obvious concern. "What kind of legal arrangements?" she asked, glancing between Marcus and me uncertainly. Marcus gestured toward the documents spread across his briefcase. "Temporary transfer of business operations to ensure stability during Willie's recovery period. He's been under tremendous stress, making threats about the company and our family relationships. I think it's best if I handle business matters until he gets professional help." "Threats?" I repeated, genuinely confused by the accusation. "What threats have I made, Marcus?" His smile was pure malice masked as patient explanation. "You've accused me of financial impropriety multiple times, Willie. You've suggested I'm somehow stealing from the company or manipulating family relationships. Those kinds of paranoid accusations could damage our business reputation if clients or employees heard them." The assembled family members exchanged worried glances, clearly buying into Marcus's narrative about my supposed mental health crisis. Uncle Frank stepped forward with awkward authority. "Willie, maybe it would be best if you just signed the papers. Let Marcus handle the business side while you focus on taking care of yourself and the kids." "Actually," I said, my heart pounding as I prepared to spring the trap, "I think everyone should hear about some business practices Marcus has implemented recently, particularly the creative accounting methods he mentioned." Marcus's expression darkened immediately. "That's enough, Willie. Your conspiracy theories aren't appropriate for family discussion." But I was just getting started, and the recording device was capturing everything. "Tell everyone about the offshore accounts, Marcus. Explain how you've been moving company profits to the Cayman Islands while claiming reduced income to avoid paying employee bonuses and proper taxes." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Marcus's face went through several color changes before settling on an angry red. "You're having some kind of mental breakdown, Willie. These paranoid delusions are exactly why you can't be trusted with business decisions." Delusions. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos Rodriguez had taken of bank documents. These account statements show over $800,000 transferred out of company accounts in the past 18 months, money that should have gone to employee profit sharing and retirement contributions. Cousin Timothy moved closer to look at the phone screen, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Marcus, what is this about? These numbers look real." Marcus lunged forward, trying to grab my phone. "He's probably fabricated those documents. Willie's been obsessed with proving some imaginary conspiracy for months. This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior I've been concerned about." But his desperate reaction was confirming my accusations instead of refuting them. Aunt Dorothy's protective instincts kicked in as she saw Marcus becoming physically aggressive. "Marcus, calm down. If these are fake documents, getting angry won't help prove that." I stepped back, keeping the phone out of Marcus's reach while continuing my revelations. "The offshore accounts aren't even the worst part. Marcus has been embezzling from employee pension funds, gambling away retirement savings that belong to 40 families who've worked for Dad's company for decades." "Stop it," Marcus shouted, abandoning all pretense of calm control. "You're destroying everything Dad built with these lies. I've sacrificed everything to keep this company successful while you wallowed in self-pity after your wife died." His words revealed the depth of resentment he'd been hiding for years, but they also confirmed the accuracy of my accusations. If the charges were false, a reasonable person would have calmly explained why the evidence was wrong. Instead, Marcus was having an emotional meltdown that made him look guilty of everything I'd described. Uncle Frank tried to restore order with traditional family authority. Both of you need to calm down and explain this rationally. Willie, these are serious accusations. Marcus, if they're false, we need proof they're fabricated. I can provide proof, I said, pulling out printed copies of documents Rodriguez had prepared. Bank transfers, forged invoices, fraudulent tax filings. 3 years of systematic theft from the company our father built on honest business practices. Marcus realized his situation was deteriorating rapidly. Family members were now examining the evidence with growing alarm instead of dismissing my claims as mental health issues. His carefully constructed narrative about my instability was crumbling in real time. Even if some of these allegations were true, Marcus said switching tactics toward damage control. I was trying to save the business from Willie's poor decisions. The pension fund loans were temporary measures to prevent bankruptcy after he demanded expensive modifications to company operations. It was another lie since I'd never made any such demands, but Marcus was grasping for justifications that might minimize his legal exposure. What he didn't realize was that his admissions were being recorded and would be used against him in federal court. Temporary loans from retirement accounts. Aunt Dorothy's voice carried the shock of someone realizing the full scope of the betrayal. Marcus, those people trusted you with their futures. How could you gamble with money that wasn't yours? It wasn't gambling, Marcus exploded. They were strategic investments designed to generate returns that would benefit everyone. If Willie hadn't interfered with his paranoid investigations and accusations, I could have replaced the money before anyone noticed. His confession was complete now. He'd admitted to taking pension funds, confirmed the gambling losses, and revealed his intention to cover up the crimes indefinitely. The recording device had captured everything Rodriguez and the FBI would need for prosecution. But Marcus wasn't finished destroying himself. In his desperation to regain control of the situation, he made the mistake that would end his freedom forever. Besides, he snarled at me with pure hatred. You have no right to judge my business decisions. Not after your negligence contributed to Sarah's death. The accusation was so shocking and cruel that everyone on the dock froze in stunned silence. Emma and Jake, who had wandered closer during the argument, heard their uncle's words about their mother's death. Emma began crying, while Jake looked confused and frightened. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Marcus realized he'd gone too far, but his rage made it impossible to backtrack. "You heard me. If you'd made better medical decisions instead of throwing money at hopeless treatments, Sarah might still be alive. Your emotional decision-making killed your wife, just like it's destroying our family business." The dock seemed to vibrate with tension as family members processed the cruelty of Marcus's words. But I had one more card to play: information Rodriguez had discovered that would destroy Marcus completely. "Interesting that you mentioned Sarah's medical care," I said, pulling out the final piece of evidence. "Because this police report shows that someone tampered with her car's brake lines 2 days before the accident that killed her. Someone with mechanical knowledge who had access to our garage." Marcus's face went white as I continued. "The investigation was closed as inconclusive, but the timing is remarkable. Sarah died 3 weeks after she discovered irregularities in the business accounts and threatened to report them to the authorities. The implication hung in the air like poison. I wasn't directly accusing Marcus of murder, but the evidence suggested his sabotage might have contributed to Sarah's death. Whether intentionally or through reckless intimidation, his actions had potentially caused the accident that destroyed my world." Marcus stood frozen, realizing that his family now saw him as someone capable of theft, manipulation, and possibly murder. The reunion he'd planned as his final triumph had become his complete downfall, and there was no way to recover from the truths that had been revealed. What none of us knew was that we were being watched from the tree line by men who'd come to collect Marcus's gambling debts, and they'd heard every word of our confrontation. The reunion was about to become something far more dangerous than a family dispute about stolen money. The silence following my revelation about Sarah's car was broken by the sound of footsteps on gravel. 3 men in dark clothing emerged from the tree line, walking purposefully toward the dock where our family had gathered. Marcus saw them first, his face draining of what little color remained, as he recognized faces that meant his time for games had ended. Marcus Patterson called the largest of the 3 men, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to collecting debts through intimidation. "We've been waiting patiently for our conversation about your outstanding obligations." Emma and Jake pressed closer to me, sensing danger, even if they didn't understand what was happening. Aunt Dorothy instinctively moved between the children and the approaching strangers, while Uncle Frank stepped forward with confused protective instincts. "I'm sorry, but this is a private family gathering," Frank said with the kind of polite firmness that works on door-to-door salesmen, but means nothing to professional collectors. "You'll need to leave the property immediately." The lead man ignored Frank completely, his attention focused entirely on Marcus. $2.3 million, Marcus. Our associates in Atlantic City are becoming impatient with your promises of payment. Today was supposed to be settlement day according to your last conversation with our representative. Marcus's carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time, with his family witnessing both his financial crimes and the dangerous people he owed money to. "I told you I needed until Monday," he said, his voice cracking under pressure. "The business sale is being finalized and I'll have your money by then." "Business sale." The man's laugh was cold and humorless. "We did some research on your family's construction company, Marcus. Turns out you don't actually have the authority to sell anything without your brother's signature. And based on the conversation we just overheard, Willie doesn't seem inclined to help you out." It was then that I realized Rodriguez's plan had worked perfectly. Not only had Marcus confessed to his crimes on tape, but his gambling creditors had provided additional witnesses to his admissions. The FBI agents positioned in the woods now had multiple reasons to move in immediately. "Federal agents, everyone remain calm," came a voice from behind the cabin, as Special Agent Mills and 3 other officers appeared with weapons drawn, but not aimed. "Mr. Patterson, you're under arrest for violation of federal banking and retirement security laws." The relief I felt was overwhelming, but Marcus's reaction was pure desperation. "You don't understand," he shouted at the agents while pointing at the debt collectors. "These men threatened my family. I only took the money to protect my children from dangerous criminals." Agent Mills approached with professional, calm handcuffs ready. "Marcus Patterson, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The Miranda warning continued as Marcus was taken into custody, his protests about coercion and threats falling on deaf ears. The debt collectors found themselves in an equally difficult position. The FBI's presence meant their illegal collection activities were now under federal scrutiny, and they quickly decided that retrieving money from Marcus wasn't worth risking arrest themselves. They melted back into the woods as efficiently as they'd appeared, though Agent Mills made note of their presence for follow-up investigation. Rodriguez emerged from his hiding position near the cabin, carrying recording equipment and a satisfied expression. "Every word is on tape," he announced to the assembled FBI agents. "Confession to pension fund embezzlement, admission of fraudulent tax filings, confirmation of offshore account activity, and threats against his brother's family." The next few hours transformed the reunion from family gathering to crime scene investigation. FBI forensic accountants arrived to secure documents Marcus had brought, while additional agents began interviews with family members who'd witnessed his confessions. The legal documents Marcus had prepared for me to sign were revealed as completely fraudulent. designed to transfer ownership through forged signatures and manufactured consent. Aunt Dorothy sat on the cabin's front porch with Emma and Jake trying to explain what was happening in terms they could understand. Uncle Marcus made some bad choices with money that didn't belong to him, she said gently. The police officers are here to make sure he faces consequences for those choices. Uncle Frank approached me with obvious shame about his earlier support for Marcus's version of events. Willie, I owe you an enormous apology. We all do. Marcus convinced us you were the problem when he was the one destroying everything Dad built. He's very good at manipulation, I replied, watching as agents loaded boxes of evidence into their vehicles. For years, I thought I was losing my mind because nothing seemed to add up. Finding out I was right about the financial irregularities doesn't feel like victory when it means our father's company was built on lies. But Agent Mills had more information that would put Marcus's crimes in even starker perspective. She approached with a folder containing bank records and investment statements that painted a complete picture of his gambling addiction and theft timeline. Your brother has been embezzling for over 4 years, she explained. It started small, probably borrowing money with intentions of paying it back. But gambling addiction escalated his risk-taking, and he began stealing larger amounts to fund increasingly desperate bets. The timeline meant Marcus's crimes had begun while our father was still alive, using his trust and declining health to hide financial manipulation. Dad had spent his final months believing his oldest son was successfully managing the family business, never knowing that Marcus was systematically looting everything he'd worked to build. The pension fund theft alone carries a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years, Agent Mills continued. Combined with tax evasion, bank fraud, and racketeering charges, your brother is looking at significant federal prison time. As the investigation continued, Rodriguez pulled me aside to discuss the evidence regarding Sarah's car accident. The brake line tampering is documented in the police file, but proving Marcus's involvement will be challenging. The investigation was closed due to insufficient evidence, and reopening it would require new information we don't currently have. So he might never face consequences for Sarah's death. I asked, feeling a familiar ache of grief mixed with frustration. Not necessarily, Rodriguez replied. His financial crimes carry serious sentences, and federal prosecutors sometimes use related evidence to establish patterns of criminal behavior. If they can show Marcus was willing to threaten or harm people to protect his theft operation, it strengthens their case for maximum sentencing. The sun was setting over the lake as the FBI finished securing evidence and preparing to transport Marcus to federal detention. Family members sat in shocked clusters around the cabin, processing the revelation that someone they'd trusted had been systematically destroying lives for years. Cousin Jessica approached me with tears in her eyes. Willie, I feel horrible about doubting you. Marcus was so convincing when he talked about your mental state and financial problems. I actually thought we were helping by supporting his control of the business. You were trying to protect the family, I assured her. Marcus exploited that instinct by making you think I was the threat. None of you could have known he was manipulating everyone's good intentions. Timothy was examining bank statements. Agent Mills had shared his expression, showing the shock of someone realizing the scope of financial betrayal. 40 families are going to lose their retirement savings because of what he did. People who trusted Dad's company with their futures, people who've worked there for 20 years. The human cost of Marcus's crimes was staggering when viewed in its entirety. Stolen pension funds, manipulated family relationships, employees betrayed by someone they'd trusted, and the possible murder of my wife to cover up financial crimes. The brother I'd grown up with had become something monstrous while wearing the mask of family loyalty. As Agent Mills prepared to leave with Marcus in custody, she shared one final piece of information that would ensure justice was served completely. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has been investigating several related cases involving offshore money laundering and illegal gambling operations. Your brother's cooperation could reduce his sentence, but based on tonight's behavior, I don't think he's interested in accepting responsibility for his actions. Marcus was loaded into the federal transport vehicle, still protesting his innocence and blaming external circumstances for his choices. He looked back at our family gathered on the cabin porch, his expression showing no remorse for the lives he'd destroyed, only anger at being caught. The reunion ended with family members making plans to support the employees and families affected by Marcus's theft. Uncle Frank volunteered to help with legal proceedings, while Aunt Dorothy offered to coordinate financial assistance for workers whose retirement funds had been stolen. The crisis had revealed the true character of our family members, and despite everything Marcus had done to divide us, we were coming together to repair the damage. As Rodriguez and I packed up the recording equipment that had captured Marcus's confessions, he shared his perspective on the investigation's outcome. In 30 years of financial crime investigation, I've never seen a case where the perpetrator was so thoroughly destroyed by his own arrogance. Marcus could have negotiated a plea deal if he'd accepted responsibility, but his need to be right about everything guaranteed maximum consequences. Emma and Jake fell asleep in the car during our drive home, exhausted by a day that had forever changed their understanding of family relationships. They'd witnessed their father being vindicated and their uncle being arrested, but they'd also learned that adults sometimes do terrible things to people they're supposed to love. The apartment that had felt cramped and depressing for months now seemed like a safe haven as I carried my sleeping children inside. Mrs. Patterson met us at the door with hot chocolate and gentle concern about the day's events. Her consistent kindness had been the one stable relationship in our lives during the investigation period, and her presence felt like a blessing. Justice was served today, I told her as we watched Emma and Jake sleep peacefully in their shared bedroom. But it came at a terrible cost for everyone involved. Justice always does, she replied with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through many family tragedies. The important thing is that your children will grow up knowing their father fought for what was right, even when it was difficult and painful. The investigation phase of our ordeal was complete, but the recovery process would take much longer. Marcus's crimes had damaged far more than bank accounts and business relationships. He'd poisoned trust, destroyed security, and potentially murdered the woman I loved to protect his theft operation. But as I watched Emma and Jake sleep in the home we'd managed to keep despite Marcus's efforts to destroy us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope for the future. The truth was finally revealed. Justice was being served, and my children would grow up understanding that fighting for what's right sometimes requires incredible courage and sacrifice. 6 months after Marcus's arrest, I stood in the office that had once been his domain, looking out at Patterson Construction's main warehouse, where honest work was happening for the first time in years. The federal court had sentenced Marcus to 18 years in federal prison for embezzlement, tax evasion, bank fraud, and racketeering. The judge had been particularly harsh because Marcus showed no remorse during sentencing, instead blaming his victims and claiming he was the real victim of a conspiracy. The business restructuring process had been complex, but ultimately successful. With FBI assistance, we'd recovered most of the stolen pension funds from Marcus's offshore accounts, though some money was lost to gambling debts that couldn't be reclaimed. The 40 employees whose retirement savings Marcus had stolen received full restitution, plus interest funded partially by the government's victim compensation program and partially by liquidating Marcus's assets. Taking over Patterson Construction's operations had been overwhelming at first, but I'd hired experienced managers to handle areas where I lacked expertise. The company's reputation damaged by news of Marcus's crimes was slowly being rebuilt through transparent business practices and fair treatment of both employees and clients. Several clients who'd left during the scandal had returned after seeing our commitment to honest accounting and quality work. Emma and Jake were thriving in ways that still amazed me. With our financial struggles resolved, Emma had enrolled in an advanced art program where her creativity flourished. Her teacher described her work as emotionally sophisticated and noted her unusual ability to express complex feelings through color and composition. Jake had joined a Little League team where his natural athleticism and competitive spirit reminded me of our father. The private school they now attended understood their family history and provided counseling support to help them process the trauma of discovering their uncle's betrayal. Both children had asked difficult questions about why Uncle Marcus had been so cruel to them, and we'd worked with child psychologists to provide age-appropriate explanations that didn't destroy their faith in family relationships entirely. Mrs. Patterson had become an honorary grandmother to Emma and Jake, officially moving into our guest bedroom when we purchased a 4-bedroom house in the same neighborhood where our father had raised Marcus and me. She insisted she was only staying temporarily to help with the transition, but her presence had become such a comfort to all of us that temporary was looking increasingly permanent. The most surprising development in our new life was my relationship with Amanda Richardson, the art teacher at Emma's school. We'd met during a parent conference where she'd praised Emma's artistic development, and our conversation had gradually evolved into coffee meetings and eventually romantic dinners. Amanda understood single parenthood, having raised her own daughter after divorce, and she brought a calming influence to our household that felt like exactly what we'd needed. "You're not trying to replace their mother," Amanda had assured me during one of our early conversations about the complexity of blending families. "You're helping them build new traditions while honoring the memory of the woman who gave them life. That's completely different and much more healthy." The legal proceedings surrounding Marcus's case had revealed additional victims beyond our family and the construction company employees. The gambling operation he'd been involved with was part of a larger criminal network that included money laundering, loan sharking, and illegal sports betting. Marcus's cooperation with federal investigators had been minimal, but his records had helped prosecutors build cases against several other criminals. Rodriguez had become something more than a business associate during the investigation process. His dedication to uncovering the truth, even when it meant working long hours for a client who could barely afford his services, had earned my permanent respect and friendship. He now served as a security consultant for Patterson Construction, helping us implement financial safeguards that would prevent future embezzlement. "Your brother's case taught me something important," Rodriguez had told me recently. "Family trust can be the most dangerous kind of trust because it bypasses normal business skepticism. Companies need protection from insiders just as much as they need protection from external threats." The most difficult aspect of our recovery had been dealing with the possibility that Marcus had murdered Sarah. The police investigation into her car accident had been reopened based on the evidence Rodriguez uncovered, but proving Marcus's involvement remained challenging. The brake line tampering was documented, but establishing a direct connection to Marcus required evidence that no longer existed after 3 years. Detective Williams, the officer assigned to Sarah's case, had been honest about the limitations they faced. "We know someone with mechanical knowledge tampered with your wife's car," he'd explained. "We know your brother had access and motivation. But proving intent to cause death versus intent to intimidate requires evidence we simply don't have." The ambiguity was maddening, but I'd made peace with the possibility that Marcus might never face additional charges for Sarah's death. His 18-year sentence for financial crimes ensured he'd spend most of his remaining useful life in prison, and that felt like sufficient justice, even if it wasn't complete justice. Emma had surprised everyone by asking to visit Marcus in federal prison, wanting to understand why he'd been so cruel to her and Jake. The counselors had advised against it initially, but Emma's maturity and specific questions convinced them she could handle the conversation with proper preparation and supervision. The visit had been heartbreaking and illuminating. Marcus showed no remorse for his crimes and attempted to justify his actions by blaming our father's favoritism and my supposed incompetence. When Emma asked why he'd been mean to her, and Jake Marcus's response revealed the depth of his narcissism. "I wasn't mean to you," he'd said with genuine confusion. "I was trying to protect you from your father's poor choices. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions that children don't understand." Emma's response had been devastating in its clarity. Protecting someone means keeping them safe and loved. What you did was hurt people and lie about it. That's not protection, Uncle Marcus. That's just being mean because you wanted things you couldn't have. The conversation had ended Marcus's relationship with his niece and nephew permanently, but it had also given Emma closure she hadn't realized she needed. She understood now that Marcus's cruelty wasn't about anything she or Jake had done wrong. It was about his inability to accept responsibility for his own choices and failures. The financial recovery from Marcus's crimes had allowed me to establish the Sarah Patterson Memorial Foundation, which provided emergency assistance to families facing medical bankruptcy due to cancer treatment costs. The foundation's first year had helped 12 families avoid losing their homes while fighting for their loved ones' lives, and the work felt like a meaningful way to honor Sarah's memory. Jake had become the foundation's unofficial mascot, appearing in promotional materials and speaking at fundraising events with surprising poise for a 7-year-old. "My mommy died from cancer, but my daddy fought to save her," he would tell audiences. "Now we help other families fight too, so they don't have to choose between saving money and saving people." The second-year reunion at the lake house had been a completely different experience from the disaster that led to Marcus's arrest. Family relationships that had been poisoned by his manipulation were healing through honest conversation and shared activities. Emma and Jake were welcomed warmly by cousins who now understood they'd been lied to about our family's circumstances. Aunt Dorothy had taken on the role of family historian, documenting our father's real legacy, separate from Marcus's lies and manipulations. She'd interviewed long-term employees about Dad's business practices and personal character, creating a record that Emma and Jake could treasure as they grew older. "Your grandfather was a man who kept his word," she'd told them during one of our monthly family dinners. "He treated his employees fairly, paid his bills on time, and never asked anyone to do something he wasn't willing to do himself. Those are the values that built Patterson Construction, and those are the values your father is using to rebuild it." Uncle Frank had become an unexpected ally in managing the business side of our recovery. His accounting background proved invaluable in restructuring company finances and implementing the safeguards Rodriguez had recommended. The partnership had strengthened family bonds while ensuring Patterson Construction would never again be vulnerable to internal theft. The employees who'd been affected by Marcus's pension fund theft had responded to the crisis with remarkable resilience and loyalty. Instead of seeking employment elsewhere, most had chosen to stay with the company through the rebuilding process. Their faith in our family's commitment to making things right had been both humbling and inspiring. Construction foreman Miguel Santos, who'd worked for Dad for over 20 years, had expressed the collective sentiment during our first company meeting after Marcus's sentencing. "Mr. Patterson built this company on trust and honest work," he'd said. "Marcus tried to destroy that legacy, but Willie brought it back. We're proud to work for Patterson Construction again." The personal growth Emma and Jake had shown through this ordeal continued to amaze everyone who knew them. They'd learned difficult lessons about betrayal and justice while maintaining their natural optimism and trust in relationships. Child psychologists described their resilience as remarkable, attributing it to consistent love and honest communication about complex adult issues. Emma's art had evolved to include pieces about family justice and healing that demonstrated sophisticated emotional understanding. One painting titled "When Truth Comes Home" showed a family standing together under bright sunlight after a storm had passed. The symbolism was obvious but powerful, reflecting her processed understanding of our journey from crisis to recovery. Jake's athletic abilities had flourished with proper nutrition and opportunities to participate in organized sports. His Little League coach had mentioned the possibility of advanced training if his interest and skills continued developing. More importantly, Jake's natural leadership qualities were emerging as he helped younger players learn fundamentals and good sportsmanship. The romantic relationship with Amanda had evolved into something that felt permanent and healing for all of us. She'd introduced structure and calm to our household while respecting the memory of Sarah and the children's need to process their grief. Her own daughter, 12-year-old Sophie, had become like an older sister to Emma and Jake. "Blended families require patience and respect," Amanda had observed during one of our conversations about the future. "Everyone needs time to adjust and everyone's feelings need to be acknowledged, but when it works, it creates something beautiful and stronger than what existed before." As I write this story, 3 years have passed since that devastating family reunion, where Marcus's crimes were finally exposed. Patterson Construction is thriving under honest management. The employees have recovered their stolen retirement funds, and my children are growing up in an environment of security and love that seemed impossible during those dark months of financial struggle. Marcus remains in federal prison where he'll stay for at least another 15 years. He's never apologized for his crimes or acknowledged the pain he caused, but his inability to accept responsibility no longer affects our daily lives. We've moved forward without him building something better than what existed before his betrayal. The most important lesson I've learned from this experience is that fighting for truth and justice sometimes requires incredible personal sacrifice. But the alternative, allowing corruption and abuse to continue, is worse than any temporary struggle. Standing up to Marcus meant risking everything I had left, but it also meant protecting my children's future and honoring the memory of the woman I loved. Emma and Jake will grow up understanding that their father fought for what was right when it would have been easier to surrender. They'll know that family relationships require honesty, respect, and accountability, not blind loyalty to people who betray trust. Most importantly, they'll understand that love means protecting people from harm, even when that protection comes at personal cost. The lake house where our family gathers now represents healing rather than manipulation. Children play on the dock where Marcus once tried to steal my inheritance, and their laughter has replaced the echoes of his lies and threats. The sunset over the water reminds us that even the darkest days eventually end, and morning always comes for those who survive the night. As Emma and Jake sleep peacefully in their own bedrooms, secure in the knowledge that their father will always fight to protect them, I feel grateful for the strength that carried us through the storm. Marcus thought he could destroy our family through lies and theft, but instead he revealed the true bonds that connect people who genuinely love each other. Justice was served, truth was revealed, and love ultimately triumphed over greed and manipulation. In the end, that's the only victory that really matters. What would you do if you discovered a family member was systematically betraying your trust and stealing your future? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you believe in standing up for justice even when it's difficult. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges, and share this with someone who needs to know that fighting for truth is always worth the struggle. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite being afraid. Until next time, keep fighting for the people and principles that matter most in your life.